All right, everybody, we are back. There is no UFC this week, but there is the Professional Fighters League World Championship for 2024. So, in something we've done on the channel before, but it's something we haven't done in a long time, I'm going to be breaking down the main card, all the world title fights for the PFL World Championship taking place this Friday from Saudi Arabia. Like I said, we have 6 fights. There are some decent fights on the early card for the PFL Mania finals. One I would say that I was going to talk about, but we're not going to, is Jose Perez fighting on the early card. I've interviewed Perez before. There's probably a little bit of bias in who I'm picking in his fight, but I decided to go against breaking that fight down. But I'm excited to see Perez hopefully get his second victory on the big stage in the PFL on a pretty big card, even though he's going to be competing earlier in the day. But let's get into it with the first fight up and the first championship fight of the evening. All right, the first battle is for the heavyweight championship. You have a fight between Denis Goltsov, the Russian Bogatyr, I think the Russian Bogatyr, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, taking on Oleg Popov. 19-1 on the side of Popov, taking on 35-8 on the side of Denis Goltsov. I'm going to keep this one pretty short. I like Goltsov to eventually find a finish with his ground and pound. Popov has decent power on the feet. He throws big overhand rights, big looping heavy punches. And, we've seen Goltsov get knocked out before. We've seen him get rocked. And I do think that Popov has the power to do something along those lines. I think he can hurt Goltsov. I think he does have the better wrestling, but I think the fighter with the better cardio is Goltsov. I think the fighter who probably is going to be able to push a pace, because remember, all these fights on the main card are 5-rounders. If it's a 5-round fight, I'm much more confident on the side of Denis Goltsov than I would be in a 3-rounder, because in a 3-rounder, I think Popov could use his wrestling, could use his chain wrestling, could use his reversals, because we've seen Goltsov get reversed by the likes of Linton Vassell, who isn't a great grappler, but he did reverse Goltsov at certain points in that fight, which could give people some reasoning to be concerned against a guy who is as high level of a wrestler and grappler as a guy like Popov. But I do think Popov will have some success getting some takedowns. But at the end of the day, I think the forward pressure, the chain wrestling, and just the pace that Goltsov's going to be able to push through a 5-rounder is what's really going to break Popov down the stretch. I think it's going to be a close 2 rounds in the beginning, at least close round and a half, and then I think Popov's going to start to slow down. I think Goltsov's going to be able to get that top position a lot easier. I think he's going to be probably the best grappler that Popov has fought in the PFL, and I think the pressure, the ground and pound, and the output that Goltsov has once the fight gets to the floor, I do think he's going to be able to break a guy like Popov down the stretch. I think Popov, like I said, probably the best grappler or one of the best grapplers that Goltsov has fought, but I don't think he's a much better striker on the feet, and I think overall the output on the ground, the cardio, the pace he's able to push is really what's going to push him towards winning the heavyweight championship. I'm going to go with the underdog, who I don't believe was the underdog earlier in the week, in Denis Goltsov. I'm going to go Goltsov via a late second round ground and pound TKO. I think he'll get that top position. He'll start landing, like I said, and just kind of break down Popov. And he might get him in the 3rd round, but I'm going to go late 2nd round TKO for the new heavyweight champion and the 2024 heavyweight PFL champion in Denis Goltsov in the first fight up. All right, up next for the lightweight championship, you have a man who I don't think many people thought was going to be in this position in Brent Primus, the former Bellator lightweight champion, a man who holds a victory over Michael Chandler, taking on Gadzi Rabadanov. Rabadanov is 23-4-2, Brent Primus 15-3 as a professional mixed martial artist. You look at the 4 losses on the side of Rabadanov, I do believe they've been decisions. I don't think he's been finished before. Okay, never mind. He's got 2 KO losses, 1 decision loss, and 1 submission loss. Last time he was knocked out was back in September of 2013 by Gusein Esenbayev. That was in ID MMA. And then he did lose a decision, or he got submitted by Kuat Kamatov And since then, the only real loss he's had was a decision loss at Eagle FC to Mehdi Dakayev. Since then, he's rattled off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 wins in a row. In the PFL, he does have a finish in his last fight against Michael Dufort. But besides that, a lot of the times he's winning by decision. You know, he is a decision fighter, but he does have good striking. He does have good power on the feet. And the one thing we know about Brent Primus is, yeah, he has some power. Yes, he could hurt Ramadanov if he catches him on the chin and puts him down. But I think that there's a huge advantage on the feet for Ramadanov. I think that it's night and day. It might even be worse than that. Brent Primus is slow. He's lethargic. He kind of winds up on a lot of his punches. And yes, he does have power. But the way Brent Primus is going to win this fight is by being able to chain wrestle, being able to grapple, being able to win scrambles on the mat against a guy like Ramadanov. And I do think that if it goes late, if we get into the third, the fourth, the fifth round of a championship fight, yes, Brent Primus does have the championship experience, but I don't know if he's going to be able to last. Now, you look at Primus, he's 15-3. And, you know, out of his 3 losses, I believe he only lost 1 time by TKO. Let me see if I'm correct with that. Yeah, he has 1 TKO loss, and that came to Alexander Shabali back in June of 2022 at Bellator 282. He got put down with a right cross and then got finished off with some ground and pound. Since then, he's rattled off 4 wins and had 1 fight that was a no contest, and I believe that's because Usman Nurmagomedov did test positive, but that was a pretty dominant win for Usman. You know, he was able to take him down, control him, get him to the ground, hold him up against the cage, and outstruck him on the feet as well. A lot of inside and outside trips, and I kind of think Ramadonov's going to be able to do a similar thing. Not that I think he's on the level of an Usman Nurmagomedov. I do think that he has more power on the feet than a guy like Usman in his hands. I think Usman's the better kicker. Ramadanov probably has the better boxing. Good check, left hook, good 1-2. I think he's going to be able to manage the range, manage the distance, and throw some big shots, and, you know, just kind of break down Brent Primus. Primus is tough. Like I said, not a guy who gets finished that often, so maybe he could win in the later rounds. Maybe he could win in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. You know, use that quote-unquote championship experience that he has from, you know, fighting some pretty good guys in his MMA career. And like I said, having that win over Michael Chandler, that was due to the calf kicks. Back then, we thought it was kind of a fluke, but now, you know, seeing what calf kicks do, that was a pretty legitimate win. I mean, call it what you will, but it was a TKO due to calf kicks, and Chandler wasn't able to get back up or get back to what he needed to do. I think Ramadanov is much cleaner. He's much crisper. He manages range better. He has better output. He has better power. I think Primus is better on the top position than Ramadanov. I think Primus might have the better cardio, but he does slow down as well. And I'm going to have to go with Godzi Ramadanov here to win this fight. I think he becomes the PFL lightweight champion for the 2024 season. I think he eventually TKOs Brent Primus, but it would not surprise me if it makes it the distance. I think Primus is tough, he's durable, but he's just too slow, he's too stiff, and I think Ramadonov's going to be able to compete in the grappling and stuff the takedowns and work his way back up to the feet, enough to the point where he gets Primus tired and then just eventually is able to tee off. I'm going to go Godzi Ramadanov to beat Brent Primus via a 3rd round TKO. I think either round 3 or round 4, somewhere in those 2 rounds is where Ramadonov's going to take over. He's going to hurt Primus with a big shot, and then he's going to put him away with some ground and pound. Maybe you think Primus gets submitted. I think that's more than live here because he could get rocked on the feet, shoot a bad takedown, and get subbed, but I would be more leaning towards the side of the TKO. So give me Godzi Ramadanov to win via a 3rd round TKO against Brent Primus to become the new lightweight champion for the 2024 PFL season. All right, next up for the welterweight championship, you have a battle between Magomed Umalatov taking on the newcomer and the guy who's taken the PFL welterweight division by storm this season in Shamil Musayev. Musayev versus Umalatov. This is probably one of the best and most competitive fights on the card. You have an undefeated 17-0 Umalatov taking on a 19-0 Shamil Musayev. When do you really get a championship fight with 2 undefeated fighters? One of the times I can think of it would be Daniel Cormier versus John Jones, even though John Jones technically wasn't undefeated. Umalatov 17-0. Out of those 17 wins, he has 13 finishes, 11 knockouts, 2 submissions. He got a submission against Brennan Ward back in June of this year. That was in the first round via an anaconda choke. Then he comes in, goes to decision with Neiman Gracie. When you look at Shamil Musayev, 19-0-1. But out of his 19 wins, he has 11 wins by KO, 2 submissions, and 6 wins by decision. But looking at the PFL lately, he went to a decision in his last fight against Murad Ramazanov. That was at the PFL 9 fights in August. Before that, he fought Murad Ramazanov again, knocked him out in the second round. A right cross to a brutal left hook that basically spun the head of Ramazanov around his shoulders like Regan from The Exorcist. And then in his PFL debut, he comes in and he knocks out Logan Storley in the second round. A brutal right uppercut off a low kick, followed up with a left hook, jumped on him, landed some ground and pound, and then as Storley tried to work his way up to the feet, he hit him with a brutal uppercut that put him face down, ass up, and knocked out. And that is where Shamil Musayev made the statement that he's here to not only compete in the welterweight tournament for the PFL, but to win the welterweight championship. Umalatov is a good striker. He moves around well. He uses his jab well. He throws his 1-2. He's got decent kicks to the body. He can throw head kicks as well. He's a very clean and technical striker. He actually reminds me a lot of the guy we just talked about who's fighting Brent Primus, which of course after you talk about him you forget their name, but Rabadanov and Umalatov, they kind of remind me of each other a little bit, except I think Umalatov is a little bit more crisp and clean on the feet. When he smells the finish, he'll go for it. But Shamil Musayev's a clean striker, and he's a very good grappler, but he uses his grappling from a defensive position. That's kind of like a Justin Gaethje to me. You know, Gaethje was a credentialed wrestler heading into the UFC, but he never really used his wrestling. One of the only times we ever saw him use his wrestling was in a reversal against Michael Chandler, and then he used it to get a takedown at the end of the third round against Rafael Fiziev, where he came in and won that fight when a lot of people thought Fiziev was going to put him away. I think Shamil Musayev has all the weapons to become the welterweight champion in this season, but again, you got undefeated versus undefeated. I think the power is actually on the side of Musayev. I feel like, you know, Umalatov has decent power. He has a good jab, a good left hook, good 1-2s down the middle. He moves well. He uses decent footwork, but I find Musayev to be a little bit more impressive, and maybe it's just because we have a small sample size of him in the PFL, but I mean, from what I've seen, he should have been able to knock out he should have been able to knock out his opponent in his last fight after he knocked him out in the first fight. Of course, you know, when you're talking about him, you forget their names. He should have been able to knock out Ramazanov in that second fight. It didn't happen. Ramazanov was able to, you know, survive and do what he needed to do to make it to the end. But at the end of the day, man, I think it's Musayev's time. I know that his opponent's undefeated. You can't take an undefeated fighter for granted, but both guys are undefeated. And I think Musayev is a little bit more dangerous. I think Musayev has good enough defensive grappling to keep it on the feet where he wants the fight to be. I think Musayev is going to be able to compete with Umalatov. I think Umalatov uses his jab well. He uses his footwork and movement. He throws good 1-2s. He's got a good left hook. But at the end of the day, I just think the fighter who's going to land the more impactful shots, the fighter who's going to go for the finish more in this fight, is Shamil Musayev. I don't necessarily agree with the money line odds. I mean, at first it was like -160 on Musayev. I like that a lot. And now he's like -230. It might have went down a little bit. I wouldn't bet a -230 against a guy who's also undefeated at 17-0. But I do think the fighter who's going to have the bigger moments is Musayev. I think the fighter who has more impactful shots and is going to land more impactful shots is Musayev. I think the fighter who's going to put the pressure on is Musayev. And I think Musayev's going to eventually TKO Magomed Umalatov. I think he's going to hurt him. I think he's going to crack him on the chin. He's going to put him down, and I think he will finish him. And I think he'll finish him in the second half of the fight. If you play fights on FanDuel, which most people do, you take the KO, TKO round combos for Musayev, and you go Musayev KO 2-3-4. There is a chance the fight goes to decision, but I think both guys look for the finish, and I think there will be a finish one way or the other. And for the reasons I already mentioned, I'm on the side of Shamil Musayev. I don't like the money line, for again the reasons we already talked about, but I think eventually Musayev's pressure gets to Umalatov. He hurts him, cracks him on the chin, puts him down, doesn't allow him to recover, and finishes him off. I'm going to go Shamil Musayev via third round TKO. I think you play Musayev KO 2-3-4, and I think he's going to become the welterweight champion for this season of the PFL. I think it's his time. He's had a pretty good rise. He's looked very good in his fights. I mean, coming in as a huge underdog against Logan Storley and just beating him from pillar to post, dropping him multiple times and finishing him off viciously, knocking out his last opponent. Well, it wasn't the last time he fought his last opponent, but the first time he fought his last opponent, knocking him out. Yeah, I like Musayev. Give me Shamil Musayev to become the new welterweight champion for the 2024 season via a third-round TKO against Magomed Umalatov. All right, up next, we're at the battle for the belt in the light heavyweight division between last season's champion and Impa Kasanganay trying to claim another championship win, another tournament win against a newcomer to the PFL in Dovlet Lagzhimuradov. I believe that's how you say it, Dovlet Lagzhimuradov. Looking at this fight, man, I think that this is going to be a close fight because both guys kind of fight similar. They're both very technical strikers. They both don't really like to rely on their grappling. They like to use their jab. They like to use their footwork, cut angles, move around, find the counters, backstep counters with the check hooks, 1-2s down the middle, big overhands, and a lot of knockout power. I think either of these guys are live for a knockout. We've seen, Kasanganay get clipped. We've seen him get rocked in his fights in the PFL, come back and land a big shot. I do think that if I'm going to lean towards one side, I could understand why a lot of people are on the underdog in the newcomer in Lagzhimuradov. I completely understand why people are on him in this fight because we've seen Kasanganay get hurt. We've seen him get wobbled. We've seen him come back from adversity, but we haven't really seen much adversity on the side of Lagzhimuradov. You look at his overall record, he's 24-7. The last time he lost via finish was a ground and pound against Corey Anderson. That was back in April of 2021. Then he lost to Carl Ulbrichsen, but since then he's rattled off 6 wins in a row. A decision win over a guy who most people expected was a formality in the finale, and Rob Wilkinson, Razor Rob Wilkinson. And having a decision win over Wilkinson is a big deal. That was a fight where a lot of people expected Wilkinson to get the job done there, and nobody was really giving Lagzhimuradov a shot. I think it's a similar thing here where a lot of people are expecting Kasanganay to get a win, probably get a win via knockout and claim a second championship in the PFL. And I do think that that's possible, but I do think that Lagzhimuradov is live to win this fight. I think he can hurt a guy like Impa Kasanganay. We've seen Kasanganay get hurt. We've seen him get knocked out. We saw him get knocked out with that brutal spinning wheel kick to the face, that catch and shoot where his opponent caught the wheel kick, or he caught his opponent's wheel kick and then he spun and jumped into a spinning side kick to the face. That was Joaquin Buckley. Look what Buckley's been doing in the UFC. Look what Impa Kasanganay's been doing over in the PFL. Both of those guys, it's kind of crazy to look back on when they competed against each other in the UFC. I think Kasanganay's going to have the better championship cardio. When it gets into the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th round, I think that's where Impa Kasanganay really is going to be able to put it on a guy like Lagzhimuradov. But I do think early on, Lagzhimuradov is live for a knockout. He's live to knock down Impa Kasanganay. He's live to catch him with a big overhand. He's live to catch him with a big check hook on the way in because he is very measured. He is very technical. He is very crisp. This is a fight that could be very boring. I think a lot of people are expecting fireworks in this fight. This could be a very boring, low output fight where both guys don't really want to pull the trigger. You're getting a lot of counters, you're getting a lot of feints, a lot of check hooks, moving, cutting angles, and neither guy really wants to commit because they don't want to leave themselves open for a counter. I think this fight is basically a fight between two fighters who really kind of fight the same. But I do like the championship experience. I like the PFL championship experience. I like the cardio for Impa Kasanganay. But I do worry a little bit about his chin because I think that Lagzhimuradov, even though he's not really, a knockout artist, at least from what we've seen in the PFL, he is live to catch Kasanganay with a big shot and knock him down and hurt him. Because like we've said, we've seen Kasanganay get hurt. We've seen him get dropped. We've seen him get rocked in the PFL, let alone in his MMA career, and he is there to be finished. But I do think that the experience that Kasanganay has is really what's going to pave the way for him to get another PFL championship here. I think that he will take over in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. I think he will start to have a higher output in the 3rd, 4th, and the 5th. I think Lagzhimuradov is going to slow down. I think he will start to, suck wind and be a little slower, leaving himself open for more counters. The head movement, the defense isn't really on point. Kasanganay starts to pick up the volume, starts to land the jab, starts to land the 1-2, and really starts to put his combinations together and break Lagzhimuradov in those late rounds, in those championship rounds. I like Kasanganay to find a 4th round TKO against Yagjimuradov here. Again, I understand people who are on the side of the underdog. It makes sense. This is a fight between two fighters who fight very similar, and if there is a fighter who I think has more raw power, I think it might actually be Yagjimuradov, but I do not like him here. I think Kasanganay has too much experience. Kasanganay is too smart of a fighter, and I think Kasanganay will eventually find a shot that hurts Yagjimuradov when he's already tired, when he's slowing down, and puts him away in the 4th round. Give me Impa Kasanganay to win via 4th round TKO to become the new light heavyweight champion, tournament winner for PFL in 2024. Now in the co-main event, the co-title bout, you have a battle for the women's PFL flyweight championship between the former title contender in the UFC who made her way over to the Professional Fighters League in Taila Santos, taking on the dangerous striker in Dakota Ditcheva. Dakota Ditcheva taking on Taila Santos, man, this is a great fight. This is a tough fight too, because if Taila Santos gets Dakota Ditcheva down to the ground, it's a wrap. I do believe that the grappling of Taila Santos is a much higher level than the grappling of Dakota Ditcheva. She's been coming in, she's been smoking all of her opponents, she's been knocking them out, she's been putting them down. She has gone to decision, I believe, once or twice in her career, but for the most part, when she hits these girls, when she puts those clean Muay Thai combinations, those clean kickboxing combinations on her opponents, that's when it becomes an issue. And, you know, looking at this fight, the PFL are allowing elbows for the championship fights. And I do believe that the grappling, the top control of Taila Santos could easily win her this fight. I think she is a much better grappler, much better from the top position. And I do believe she is going to test the clinch grappling, the clinch wrestling, the wrestling defense, and the cage wrestling of a girl like Dakota Ditcheva, because if she stays on the feet, yes, I think Taila Santos can compete, but at the end of the day, I think Taila Santos gets knocked out if it remains mainly a striking matchup. I think Ditcheva is just too crisp, she's too clean, she's too quick, she's too technical, and even though Santos arguably could have beaten Valentina Shevchenko, it's a fight where, man, I don't know, man, I think she's outmatched on the feet against Dakota Ditcheva. Or Dakota Ditcheva, however you want to say it. I think it's Dakota Ditcheva. But again, correct me if I'm wrong for all you merchants in the comments. Looking at this one, man, if I'm going to bet Santos, I'm going to bet Santos by sub. I'm going to bet Santos sub 2-3-4 because that's where I think she probably takes over. She's better on the ground. She's got better wrestling. She's going to be better from that top position. But I do think Dakota Ditcheva is much better on the feet. And I think Santos will be able to compete. She's not a bad striker. She will be able to compete. But the bread and butter, the way she wins this fight is in the clinch, outpowering Ditcheva, taking her down, controlling from the top, looking to set up an arm triangle, you know, looking to get on the top and take her back and set up a rear naked choke. Like the arm triangle and the rear naked choke, those are the two submissions that are probably going to be the most readily available for a girl like Santos. I do think that it's more than live that she wins this fight by sub, but basic like knowledge, I have to go to Dakota Ditcheva. I'm going to go Dakota Ditcheva by knockout. I think she will hurt Taila Santos. I think she will put her down, and I don't think it's going to be a first round, but I think Dakota Ditcheva KO 2-3-4. That's the way to play it. Or Dakota Ditcheva, even KO 2-3 is probably your best way to play that in this fight, because I do think she's going to be quicker, she's going to be faster, and she's going to be cleaner than Taila Santos, who, yes, has looked good in the PFL, but she hasn't looked amazing, and I think she's looked a little bit worse than people expected her to look, you know, coming off. She lost to Erin Blanchfield, but, you know, the loss to Valentina Shevchenko, she arguably could have been the girl who beat Shevchenko before Alexa Grasso came in and did it the first time. But I'm going to go Dakota Ditcheva, 3rd round TKO. I think she hurts Santos, rips to the body. She's got really good shot selection, really good shots to the body. I think she rips to the body, puts her down, and then finishes her off with some ground and pound. So I'm going to go with the new women's flyweight champion for the PFL, Dakota Ditcheva, to win via 3rd round body shot TKO against Taila Santos. But if the number for Santos submission is like over plus 1,000, then you have to play it, because I think if Santos wins, it's by submission. But the pick is Dakota Ditcheva, 3rd round body shot TKO. And now we're at the main event, the final championship fight for the 2024 season for the featherweight championship between the 2022 featherweight champion for the PFL and Brendan Loughnane, trying to compete for his 2nd PFL World Championship against Timur Khizriev. This is a good fight. This fight probably should be the main event. And I understand why Khizriev is a pretty big favorite. You know, he won the fight against Gabriel Braga via split decision. That was a fight where I was on the side of Gabriel Braga, but he is coming into this fight undefeated, 17-0, taking on Brendan Loughnane, 30-5. And, you know, you look at Loughnane's last few fights, he got a win over Kai Kamaka III via split decision. He got a doctor stoppage win over Justin Gonzalez with a knee. He caught him with a knee on like a takedown attempt or a level change, split his forehead completely open. You could probably stick 3 or 4 fingers in that cut. And then he knocked out Pedro Carvalho, who's, you know, pretty liable to getting knocked out. The guy doesn't really have a chin. He lost to Jesus Pinedo in the 2023 season after beating Marlon Moraes via, you know, leg kick TKO. Before that, he wins the 2022 season with a TKO in the 4th round against Bubba Jenkins. I mean, this guy doesn't lose very often. Last loss to Jesus Pinedo, who does compete on this card earlier in the card against Jeremy Kennedy. Newsflash, I'm going Jesus Pinedo by KO in that fight. But breaking this one down, man, Khizriev's a good striker. Again, he uses good footwork, good lateral movement, a good jab, a good check hook. He has decent kicks, and he's a very high-level grappler. He can get takedowns, he can cage push, he can control you. And we have seen Brendan Loughnane get taken down. We saw him lose a split decision to Movlid Haibulayev, a guy who hasn't competed in the PFL for a little while. But looking at this fight realistically, I think Loughnane is more than a live dog to win this fight against Timur Khizriev. I do not think Khizriev looked impressive in the fight against Gabriel Braga. I think Braga could have won that fight. Yes, it was close. Yes, Khizriev got some takedowns, but he didn't do much with the takedowns. You know, Braga worked his way back up. He was landing some good jabs. He was counter-striking effectively, but it was a close enough fight to where I think they could have given the fight to the big underdog in Gabriel Braga. And, you know, I'm pretty high on Braga. I picked him to get that KO over Bubba Jenkins. I've picked him in other fights before where originally when he came into the PFL, I wasn't such a big fan of him. So I do rate the win for Khizriev over Braga pretty high, but I don't think it was the most impressive performance for Timur Khizriev. And I don't think Khizriev is really that impressive of a fighter overall. Like, he does dominate some fights. He's undefeated. You have to give him credit for having an undefeated record at 17-0. But I do think Brendan Loughnane is live to win this fight. He's got 13 wins by decision, does Khizriev. Only 3 wins by KO, 1 win by submission. I don't think he submits Loughnane. I do think the KO's live, but I don't love the KO for Khizriev either. Loughnane leaves his chin in the air. He can be clipped. He can be knocked out. I do not like the defense I've seen from Brendan Loughnane in his last few fights. He backs away with his chin in the air. He backs up in a straight line. And I think Khizriev could catch him feinting, coming over the top of the left hook, feinting over the top of an overhand right. But Loughnane does have pretty good management of distance. He uses his jab. He uses front kicks to the body. And I think that the fight on the feet is going to be competitive. I think Brendan Loughnan's takedown defense is decent enough to where he probably gets taken down maybe once or twice, but I think he works his way back up to the feet. And even if Khizriev gets the takedowns, I don't think he's going to be able to submit a guy like Loughnane. So I think it makes Brendan Loughnane pretty live in this fight. You know, I know everybody's going to write him off. You know, he's coming in over a 2-1 underdog, but honestly, guys, I'm going to go with Brendan Loughnane to become the featherweight champion for the 2024 season of the PFL Championships. I think he can win this fight. I think Khizriev's good. I think Khizriev's going to land some good jabs. He's going to land some good counters. Loughnane is there to be hit. He does leave his chin in the air. He could get knocked out. But I think, you know, Loughnane's going to kind of put it on Khizriev in the 3rd, 4th, and the 5th. I think he will hurt him. I think he will start to push him back. I think he will slow down Khizriev because we saw Khizriev get pretty tired in the fight against Gabriel Braga, who showcased decent takedown defense, and even when he did get taken down, he worked his way back up. I think Loughnane can do a similar thing. I think Loughnane has more output and more ability to put combinations together and push the opponent back, get on the front foot, put him up against the cage, make him panic shoot, make him panic wrestle, and I think he has the opportunity to win this fight. I'm going Brendan Loughnane to win this fight by TKO. I'm going to go a 4th round TKO for Brendan Loughnane. I know undefeated, 17-0, you know, ending with the EV or OV. I understand, and Khizriev could win. He could knock out Loughnane. We said he is defensively irresponsible at times. He backs up with his chin in the air. Those things are all live, but most of the time this guy's going to a decision. And, you know, going to a decision, I don't see him dominating Loughnane for 5 rounds. I think Loughnane wins at least 1, maybe 2 rounds, and I think it makes the fight close. And I think he's going to have the better cardio in the championship rounds, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th. And we know he has output. We know he can hurt his opponent in the later rounds because we've seen him do it against Bubba Jenkins. So I'm going to go with Brendan Loughnane for the upset. I'm going with the big underdog. Give me Brendan Loughnane and new PFL featherweight champion for the 2024 season via a 4th round TKO. I think he's going to do it similar to how he beat Bubba Jenkins. I think he hurts his rev. He slows him down. The cardio isn't the greatest in the championship rounds. He hurts him, puts him down, and doesn't allow him to recover. Brendan Loughnane, 4th round TKO to become the new featherweight champion for the 2024 PFL season. All right, that is it for my PFL 2024 championships preview, predictions, and breakdown. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit a wheel kick on the notification bell for all future uploads from the premier mixed martial arts and pro wrestling channel on YouTube. I'm your host, Double M, and I'm out.